Okay, great. Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the podcast. I'm very excited to have Professor Joseph Ciarrochi with us today. He is a professor at the Institute for Positive Psychology and Education at Australian Catholic University and co-author of Get Out of Your Mind and Into Your Life for Teens and The Thriving Adolescent. He has published more than 140 scientific journal articles and many books, including the widely acclaimed Emotional Intelligence in Everyday Life and The Way to Escape. Professor Ciarrochi has been honored with more than $4 million in research funding. His work has been discussed on TV and radio and in magazines and many newspaper articles. So I'm sure that he's going to have a lot of valuable insight for you guys. Professor Ciarrochi, again, thank you for being willing to spare your time.
Anytime.
Okay, great. So the first question I have for you is, do you think people can be their own therapists?
Yeah, I think they probably have to be their own therapist. I mean, because there are things that are unique to humans that cause us a lot of suffering. And just by virtue of being a human, we tend to suffer. For example, we are aware of the future, and we can worry about the future and feel incredibly anxious. And we can think about the past and feel the same agony and shame that we felt from a past trauma. So humans have this unique ability to suffer and experience emotional pain, even in the absence of an actual threat or actual anything in the immediate environment, which, as far as we know, is pretty unique to humans. So because we have this natural tendency to suffer, we need to be able to be our own therapist for sure. It's the human condition. I mean, the Buddha said that, suffering is inevitable for humans, and I think that's true.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I empathize with that Buddhist perspective and the sort of existentialist, perspective of, life is not, suffering isn't pathological. It's almost foundational. And
yeah,
so if it is so foundational, if suffering is so inevitable, why shouldn't, the audience that's listening in just throw in the towel?
yeah, it's interesting. It's a certain amount of suffering is inevitable, but there's a certain amount that we can make worse if we're not aware of what's going on. So the reason we suffer is because we have this superpower called language, which lets us imagine the future, ruminate about the past, criticize ourselves, ruminate about others. That's language. And we need that power to solve, science and record history, and everything wonderful we do depends on language. But then a lot of our pain also comes from language and ruminating and worrying and criticizing ourselves. So, there's going to be a certain amount of pain that's just natural to having this superpower. But if we can become aware of its costs, and especially when we're using language in a way that really harms ourselves, then there's a chance that we can kind of, I guess, let it go a bit. We can start to notice when we're worrying and take a few breaths and bring ourselves to the present moment, so we can be caught up in a future that, may never happen, just terrified that we might lose our job, or, might not have enough money for retirement, or might not get the job we want, or we might be ruminating all day about that boss and how that person's not respecting the work we do. And that is bringing a lot of pain into the present moment that may not necessarily be helping. And so when it's not helping, I think that's the time when we can learn to release some of that pain and let it go. So we make a distinction, acceptance and commitment therapy. That's kind of my focus, between clean discomfort and dirty discomfort. So clean discomfort is just the stuff that comes along in life that's inevitable. So we're going to feel loss. We're not going to always get the job we want. Sometimes we're going to have difficult coworkers or difficult neighbors. We're going to have relationship breakdowns. That's just a clean discomfort. But dirty discomfort is when we add to that by a lot of times not accepting the inevitable pain. So we might deny that our job is really as bad as it is. And we might pretend like everything's going to work out, or we might, try and deny a future risk like global warming. And when we try and deny the inescapable pain that we're going to experience, then that makes it worse, I guess. So we can definitely do a lot to not, I guess, to accept clean discomfort. We will reduce our dirty discomfort, I guess, and the amount of suffering that we kind of bring on ourselves.
I see. That's such a cool distinction. Clean discomfort versus dirty. So I guess to do that, I'm just assuming that a lot would rely on being able to distinguish between clean discomfort and dirty discomfort.
Well, that's the tricky thing. That's a really, I mean, this is what makes it so, this is why you have to be your own therapist, because it's so tricky. I wish there were simple rules, but here's the deal. If you start to just think all the time about how you're feeling and trying to feel better, a lot of times this will destroy your well-being. So it's ironic, but trying to separate out the clean and the dirty discomfort, and is this stress the good stress, the bad stress, that kind of, there's a lot of research now that shows that kind of focus on trying to feel good and get rid of discomfort can actually amplify it. So you have to tackle it indirectly, not directly. So if you tackle it directly, that'd be like, trying to get your stress down by drinking or gambling, or I'm giving destructive examples of control here. There are probably better examples that are healthier, but distracting yourself with social media, shopping, retail therapy, all this stuff can be ineffective ways to get that discomfort down. And those can be problematic. We know that makes things worse. The indirect way is to make your life not about discomfort. Like discomfort's there, but to not make it about discomfort, but to make it about doing things that you actually value and care about. And that will bring discomfort, the clean kind. If you go for that job promotion, there's a chance you won't get it. And if you go for that new job and you think it's your dream job and you get there and it's actually a toxic workplace, there's a chance you're going to be disappointed. So every time you go for something, you got to risk discomfort. And that's true for, any competition, any kind of thing, any love, any relationship risks it ending. So I think the main way to manage this, excess suffering, let's call it, is not to focus on suffering per se, but to focus on doing what you care about. And that will have discomfort, but but you'll be so involved in your life, so involved in awesome things that you love, with the full catastrophe of anxiety, stress, and joy, that the issue of dirty discomfort won't be as prominent. It just won't be as important. So it's about indirectly getting into your life, I guess, getting into your life and doing what you care about, and not focusing so much on controlling discomfort. It's the paradox is that controlling discomfort is the thing that brings on more discomfort a lot of times. So that's what makes it so tricky. We know, for example, people with post-traumatic stress, they've had a really bad experience and they're trying to control the memory of it. They're trying not to have the memory of it. And this amplifies it and makes it more powerful. We know that people with social anxiety, they're trying to control the discomfort that they're being judged and evaluated. And we know that when people avoid social situations because they're socially anxious, this makes the anxiety worse. And now they have discomfort and they're not connecting with people. So they're losing the thing they value and they have more discomfort. So in the social anxiety case, like, you're maybe anxious about meeting somebody, going out socially. The solution to that discomfort isn't to totally try and get that discomfort down or even to eliminate it before you go out. It's to start engaging, connecting with people in a valued way and carrying the discomfort with you. And then that discomfort will still be there. You still won't want it, but it won't be toxic. It'll be living, the kind of discomfort that comes from being alive. And yeah, so that's what you're going for, being alive rather than, hiding in your room and not doing the things that you care about because you're trying to get that discomfort down.
Yeah, that to me, that makes so much sense. And what would you say to someone who, for whom this feels very out of reach, or for whom they're suffering so much that that is implicitly just the domain of concern for them?
Yeah,
Is just, that's their top priority, just not feeling what they're feeling.
yeah.
How does, what would you say to someone in a situation like that, in terms of, yeah, what you're saying?
Well, the first thing I would do is empathize with them because we've all been there. Like that place, we've all been there. It's like 50%. I've seen studies where 50% of people in a community sample, just a regular group of people like us, have thought about suicide. That's half the people, half your audience probably have seriously thought about it. Maybe they didn't have a plan. Maybe they didn't go through with it, but they thought about it. They thought, it would be better to not be alive. And we've all had that. We've all had those very dark moments. So the first thing I would do with this person is help them to understand that I've been there, and that, it doesn't make them defective or broken, and it doesn't make their life unsavable, I guess. And so that would be the beginning, just to be able to sit with the person and kind of acknowledge that pain is valid, and it's okay. And then only then, when they started to be okay with it and understood that this sucks, but it is something we're all going to have, or many of us will have, then we might start to talk about some of the things they care about and would want to do, not in a way that is meant to diminish those feelings, but just to get them engaged in things they care about. So it might be very small things, but I think the first step would be to acknowledge it, because I think we live in a society where we're not supposed to admit that we're suffering, that we're not supposed to admit negative emotions. And so if you told me if somebody was going through a lot, I would think on top of that, already going through a lot, they probably feel bad about it. They feel weak. They feel stupid. They don't feel like they can get help. Like, these are often responses that make it even worse. They feel really alone in their suffering, and they're not alone. And that's the illusion that we get in modern society, with social media and Facebook and these things, which we're always projecting these happy images, that we're always projecting that everything's awesome and everybody else's life except yours, and so that illusion needs to be punctured. That'd probably be the first step, because if you immediately go to saying, okay, you just do this, this, and this, and you'll feel better, then you're actually reinforcing the illusion. You're saying, yeah, it's just a few easy steps. There'll be no worries, and and you really need to kind of accept, when we say suffering is a human condition, I mean, I think, yeah, I really do mean that. I have to remind myself all the time when I get to that dark place, that, yeah, it applies to me too, because I'm a human being, and that acceptance is a huge first step, knowing that we'll all be in those bad places. We'll all experience loss. We're all going to experience embarrassment, rejection, judgment from others. We're all going to experience disappointment, aging, a threat of death, health scares, loss of loved ones. If you start to add it up, I mean, I think we just need to be able to kind of look honestly at life. That's the first step, and accept it, and give people space to feel.
Yeah, that's a powerful reframing, I think, and probably not something that people want to hear straight away. I'm sure that a lot of people want some sort of quick fix, or some sort of,
Yeah.
the pill, or
Well,
yeah.
if somebody wanted that, I mean, I would totally acknowledge and validate what they're going through, but we could start talking about, we could try those things. Like, it's not like I have the answers. It would be experimental. We'd say, okay, well, let's try something new. Let's just do something
Mm.
different from what we've been doing before. Because I'm not saying you should wallow in your suffering. I mean, like we do want to get you moving. So I would talk to people about, you know, what they have been doing and what can be done, what they could do that's new or different.
Mm.
Because that's going to be one of the most important things we do in our work together would be to, I guess we have to do something physically different, like with our hands and feet, we have to do something new or we'll keep getting the same outcome over and over again.
Mm.
So I think you could have acceptance and change in the same kind of space.
Mm.
That's okay. It's okay.
Mm. Nice. So yeah, holding that sort of dialectic, that seeming
Yeah.
paradox. So how? So I understand the framing of the acceptance and how that's really important, not to multiply the inevitable suffering. Um,
Yeah.
in terms of the change aspect for those who are listening and they think, okay, I might be ready to try the acceptance bit. Where do I go to from here? Where's a useful starting point for those listening?
Yep. Okay. So change is usually directed, I think. So it starts with the question, what do I care about? What kind of person do I want to be? We got to start by asking the person what they value, what
Mm.
brings vitality and energy to their life. People are rarely asked this question, and we can go years and years and years doing lots of things without thinking, well, what do I care about here? Why am I doing this?
Mm.
So we'd start with the question of what direction do you want your life to go? And people may not have a totally clear idea about that, but they might have a hint of it.
Mm.
And maybe it's like, they used to be more athletic, or they used to love playing games, or maybe they want to meet people, or maybe they want to get involved in giving, or maybe they just want to be able to be in the moment a bit more and enjoy their life, or maybe they want to work on a relationship. So we would start to kind of identify what they personally care about and value, what they endorse as, this is me, this is who I am, this is what I care about. Once we knew that, then we could start to think about actions that help them to live that way. And then they wouldn't have to do something huge. It wouldn't be like they have to run the Boston Marathon, or suddenly find a new partner, the love of their life, their soulmate, in the next week. Like, we wouldn't set goals like that. We would make it very graded. So you can have, like, whatever it is, you have to start saying yes to things and start stepping into life. But getting to yes is sometimes difficult. So we could grade it. We could have tiny steps. Like, if it was about meeting somebody new and finding love, it might be, joining a biking group or something like that. Or maybe that's a huge step for somebody. It might be smaller than that, joining some online forum. I'm not sure. Each situation would be different, but you could start with very small steps, and anything you can say yes to that's new will start things in motion. Just has to be, it could be a tiny thing. Maybe if it's just starting to take one college course or university course, or, it can be quite small, or it could be huge, depending on where the person's readiness. So it's small steps towards what they care about, not just random stuff that their parents want them to do or society says they should do. It's really about finding what they heartfelt want to do, and then supporting them to get started on that journey. At least make a tiny start, and that will start to change things for them.
Okay, that's so valuable. Start with what you care about, figuring out what it is and what kind of
Yeah.
person you want to be, and then
Yep.
not jump into the end state or the end of the goal. Just starting almost
Yeah.
humbly, in a way, modestly.
Yeah, you can. I mean, some people could start really. Some people do need to start radically. They're like, I'm going to change my life completely now. It could happen, but you don't have to make it a huge thing. Like, you could decide, this job is toxic. It's not what I wanted for my life. I'm going to quit this job and do something else. Somebody could make a radical change, I guess. So radical change is possible too. But if you feel like, I'm not ready for that huge change, you can make it small as well. So it's really, again, the person drives it. They choose the size of the jump. A small jump, or it can be a huge jump, but they choose what they're willing to do. How far are they willing to jump, I guess.
I have a question in terms of that choice. So, okay, so the jump, they've got the choice there. How much of a choice do people have in terms of what they value and the kind of person that they want to be? So when you help someone figure out what they care about and what they want to be about, is to what degree is that willfully chosen, something that they,
Yeah.
consciously choose to pursue, versus being a clarification process where it's like uncovering what is there for them?
Well, this is the tricky part. I mean, I think if you go really kind of at the highest level, most people have the same values. Like they want to connect, they want to feel a sense of control in their life and autonomy. They want to develop their skill. They want to feel challenged, but not so much that it burns them out. And they want to be healthy, but the thing that where it gets really creative is the way it's expressed in life. Like, people, there may be things out there that they would absolutely love to do, but they've never tried. They don't know about it. I've heard of people starting music in their 90s, learning piano in their 90s and discovering they love it. And that is brilliant, but it's also a little bit sad that you wait that long to discover your true love. So I think like the basics, like connecting, challenging yourself, having a sense of freedom and autonomy, those things are core to all humans, I would say. Right? But how they express it, that's almost infinitely varied. So people may not yet know their best way to connect with others, to challenge themselves. So that's where there is no one way. And it could be very surprising what a person discovers they love. So in some sense, there's a discovery process, and there's a little bit of bumbling. There's a little bit of, because we can't predict it, we're very poor at using our minds to predict what we're going to like. I think you got to actually be quite experimental and try things. You got to try that cooking class, and is that for you? Or you got to try, different hobbies, or you got to try this career. A lot of people, they try law and then they discover they don't like law. Others people say, wow, this is brilliant. So there's a sense in which it's a lot of stumbling and trying. And then I think when you do things, as opposed to just think about doing things, you really find out very quickly if you value it. So you can be assured that like actually engaging in the thing, you're going to know pretty soon if you care about it. So I really advocate a kind of discovery and experimental relationship with life where you are willing to try different things. See what happens.
Yeah. What I'm hearing in that is, I think it's something I've noticed for myself. I don't want to assume that everyone does this, but that I've noticed that I try to figure out first what would be the best thing to do, or what I would like my life to be about, or what I would like to value. And then I try to have that very neat in my mind and sort of uniform and sorted out. And then I try to dedicate myself to that and then put it into action. Whereas what you're saying sounds a bit more like try something new, try things. And so do first and then get the feedback almost. And then
absolutely
steer the ship.
Yeah. I mean, we discovered this work with young people, especially, that they like the classic asking them what they care about. You would just get blank stares and you'd get nothing. And so we had to shift the process to more of discovery, where it's more like, let's explore and try different things and then see what starts to show up. And then we realized that adults were the same. It's just that adults could give the more socially acceptable answer. They knew what answer people were looking for, so they would give that to you, but that doesn't necessarily mean they fully knew what they value. I think as we get older, we start to narrow our focus. We start to stop doing things that we used to do, which is kind of sad. We start to get super hyper focused on career and making it, and we leave valuable things behind. And so Yeah, I would say you don't need to know exactly what it is you love doing. And as a matter of fact, you may surprise yourself. So I would advocate, yeah, trying things, trying lots of things. And when you find something that, when you do it, you just naturally love doing it. For me, that was studying music. Like some people find it a real chore to study music. I don't, and I've met people who don't find it a chore at all. So that's a discovery process. I didn't know if it was going to be like, I have to study 30 minutes, now I have to practice for 30 minutes. I didn't know if it was going to be like that. And if it had been like that for me, I would have said, well, maybe that isn't for me. But I discovered it wasn't like that. So that's how I found out. Other things, like I've tried different kinds of exercise, like biking, and people swear by it and they love it, or golfing. People love this. I hate golf. I hate, well, I don't hate biking, but I didn't really like it. I didn't like being driven off the side of the road by cars and, feeling like not very relaxed in traffic. So this was a discovery process. I thought it sounded like a good idea, but it wasn't. And the way that people love fishing and golfing, I thought that was worth trying, but I discovered that it just isn't, it doesn't click. It's the same thing with the relationships, isn't it? It's like, you maybe have a list of things that you think you want in a partner, and that list, you can just about throw it away most of the time, because a lot of times you don't actually know what's going to click. You don't actually know what it is. And so to some extent, the only way to know if you found your soulmate or you're compatible is to actually go out with the person and spend some time with them. And that's kind of the way we find value. Go out and spend some time with what you think is your passion and find out, and you will know. Trust the process of discovery. Rather, what we try and do is we try and figure it all out with our minds. I want a guy who's, like this, has this by 27, they're like this and this, that we have the checklist. And that doesn't work really well a lot of times.
Yeah, no, I think that's awesome advice. I wanna ask you a very open-ended question at this stage, which is,
Sure.
Based on what you're saying, or even not based on what you're saying, but is there anything in the science, you being a scientist and having published so many articles and things like that, is there anything in the science where if people knew about this, it would make their lives better in some way, just in your opinion?
Yeah, I mean, there's no question that certain practices improve people's lives. Like, we know that if people have a clear sense of their value and they can affirm what they care about and they value, we know that can reduce stress levels. It can increase performance, especially amongst people who feel stigmatized or very, I guess, doubt themselves. Like, affirming your value can be a source of strength, a resource for you. So that's just one example. We know that is evidence-based and that works. There's lots of things. We know that mindfulness, being more mindful, reduces stress and promotes well-being. But that's a tricky one, because a lot of people think that equates to just meditating and doing long stretches of meditation, which it doesn't necessarily. Mindfulness is something that can be done just in ordinary everyday life, when you're eating, when you're hanging out with somebody, when you're doing exercise, whatever. So we know that's evidence-based. We know value, affirmation, mindfulness is evidence-based. There's a lot of these processes that have support, like avoiding your feelings and trying to over control them actually makes it worse. Well, that's one of the most well-supported findings in psychology. That control, not feel stress, will actually bring on more anxiety, more doubt, and more stress usually. So that one's a tricky one. So definitely we have evidence that there are ways to live, but that promote well-being. But we live in a society that often doesn't encourage those ways, right? We live in a very commercial society where we're encouraged to buy things and go for immediate satisfaction. And Now you have algorithms online that really focus in on 1 or 2 minute videos that get you addicted. And so young people would rather, watch a YouTube video than interact with their parents. So it's so powerful, this addiction, that we have a society that keeps pulling us away from the things that actually satisfy our needs and bring us well-being. So it's out there. I think we have a pretty clear idea of how to help people live a better life, but we are pulled into this, I guess, unhealthy way of being. That it's very materialistic, very sensation-seeking, maybe, and not always connected with other people, not always well connected. The things that go against our fundamental needs.
Yeah, great. That is, yeah. I think I've seen that in my own life as well, of how strong that pull can be, and how there's ultimately something hollow about these instant gratification, things that happen in society. There's almost, it feels like something's missing. It doesn't lead to some sort of ultimate satisfaction.
I mean, you look at the way that, Facebook was using, you're just trying to get likes. So Facebook emphasizes outrage, things that are outrage people, because things that outrage people get clicked on a lot and read a lot. So if you think about that, what we're starting to reinforce is people feeling outraged and hating each other. So that sells, but that's really bad for us as humans. But the algorithms are so effective that they'll find that thing that you feel outraged about, and they'll keep feeding you that. And so that's an example. I mean, I think we live there's a lot of things that are toxic about our environment. And so that makes, even though we know, what's healthy, it's like food, right? We know what's healthy. We don't always eat it because we live in an environment where lots of unhealthy things are just present and sold to us and easily accessible. So it's the same thing with psychological health. I mean, we kind of know what brings psychological health, but there's a lot of things that pull us away from it,
So is there, this will be one of my final questions, but is there anything is there anything very practical and I don't want to say easy, but almost accessible for most people, or simple enough to get started with, that can help push against this tide that society seems to be drifting toward?
Yeah. Well, I think the key is not to think, oh, I should watch less of this social media. I should do less of this. I should be less outraged. I think the key is to identify what you want to do more of. So it's not so much so I'll just use the health example. So people who focus on, I shouldn't eat this dessert, I shouldn't do that, I have to deprive myself, are more likely to fail at their diet, because it's like a deprivation, it's like a negation of what they care about, and that is not very motivating. So I would say that rather than thinking about what you want to avoid or get away from, think about the things you care about and trying to do more of that. So is it like adding a half an hour a day of something that you really care about? If you do that, then you'll be spending a half hour less on social media, for example. So so just like with diet, you want to kind of focus on what you want to do more of. What kind of food would you want to eat more of? What kind of healthy food is there? Do you want to try? Well, what kind of vital activities do you want to do more of? And how can you schedule them into your day? And those will naturally kind of replace the things that are more toxic to you.
Great. Yeah, that's I don't think that's intuitive. So I think it's so valuable that you say this, that assume the evidence points in that direction, that being more effective.
I mean, if you do, you only have so many hours in the day. So if you decided, okay, I'm going to do an hour of yoga, and that's one less hour that's an hour of being exposed to something good and vital and enlivening, and one less hour of things which maybe bring you down. So it is just thinking about what you want to move towards, what you care about, focusing on that. And I find that will start to sort out your life. And then you'll be like, well, you know what? I don't want to keep reading all these posts that make me feel outraged because, I love how I feel when I do yoga or when I exercise or when I go out with my mates. I really prefer that. And this is just relentlessly bringing me down. So it becomes really obvious, I think, when you start to find things that is a passion that you love and you care about, then you stop sweating the small stuff and the big stuff starts to take more control of your life.
Super. Yeah, thanks so much for that wisdom. I want to ask, just on a closing note, if you can point the listeners to any of your important work, books, projects. How can people learn more about what you're doing?
Yeah, I mean, we have a new book coming out called What Makes You Stronger. It's due out later this year. Maybe I'll come back and do another podcast with you when it's out so people can actually buy it. But that was an incredibly hard book to write. I wrote it with with Louise Hayes and Ann Bailey, and it really brings together everything, I guess, that we've been working on for the last 2 decades in terms of promoting vital living and well-being. So that really is the culmination of, I hope, of everything we know right now, and an attempt to express that. So What Makes You Stronger? Look out for that next year.
Great. Yeah, I'd love to have you back on so that we can unpack that when that's released.
Absolutely.
And for those listening, I'll put in some links so that you can get into contact with Professor Ciarrochi and any of his works. But once again, thank you so much for being on the podcast. And
no worries.
good luck with everything in the future.